Yes, you. The one whose name slips through corridors they thought were sealed. The one who keeps reappearing in hushed conversations you were never meant to know existed. The quiet storm they pretend not to feel, but privately panic about. They even sent someone to save you. Did you realize that? Someone rehearsed their concern, practiced that worried expression, tried to play the benevolent messenger bearing a difficult truth. But here's the part that still rattles them awake at night. When they ran to him for help, when they begged him to step in, to talk you down, to somehow halt the momentum they could finally feel crashing toward them, he didn't panic, he didn't hesitate, he didn't rush to intervene. He smiled. Not a warm smile, not a comforting one. No, this was the calm smile of someone who has already read the final chapter and knows the ending can't be rewritten. When they pleaded, "Can't you reach them? Can't you make them understand? Can't you stop what's about to happen?" He looked at them with that steady, unbothered certainty and answered with two words that froze the air between them. Too late. Not mournfully, not regretfully, not with a shred of pity. Just a verdict, delivered like a doctor stating the truth no one wanted to hear. Too late, because what they never grasped, what they refused to accept even while every sign blazed in front of them, is that this isn't a phase to interrupt, a situation to talk you out of, or a journey you can rewind. You already crossed the threshold. You already became the thing they hoped you'd never evolve into. You already shifted into someone who doesn't need their acceptance, their control, or their 11th hour panic solutions. The second they decided you needed to be warned was the same second they silently admitted defeat. And understand this: when someone is in danger, people rush, they act, they protect. But when someone becomes dangerous, when someone transforms into something unpredictable and untouchable, that's when committees form, whispers start, and desperate emissaries are sent to negotiate with a force they don't understand. He smiled because he knows what's already true. He knows what you've been constructing in the quiet, what's been awakening beneath the surface while they mistook your stillness for surrender. They thought they had time. They believed your evolution was slow, contained, something they could monitor and interrupt. They watched your pain like spectators, misread your silence as defeat, labeled your patience as weakness, and convinced themselves your withdrawal meant you'd given up. Now they see they were wrong, and the fear in their eyes is almost poetic, because there's nothing left for them to stop. The version of you they should have respected is already here. The strength they should have never provoked is already unleashed. And the control they thought they had? Gone. You're already beyond their reach, beyond their limits, and far beyond the point where their last-minute desperation makes any difference at all. Way more longer. Yes, you. The one whose name keeps floating like static through rooms you were never supposed to be mentioned in. The one they whisper about behind closed doors with furrowed brows and lowered voices. The presence they keep circling around without ever daring to say out loud, because acknowledging you openly would mean admitting they lost control a long time ago. You don't even know how many conversations you exist in, how many private meetings turn into quiet debates about what to do with you. How many people have already tried to manage you like some kind of situation instead of a person? Because make no mistake, they aren't worried about you falling apart. They're terrified of what you're becoming. They sent someone to warn you. Do you realize how wild that is? Someone tried to play the savior, tried to wear concern like a costume, tried to place themselves between you and the storm like they had any authority over your destiny. They pulled him aside like conspirators, voices trembling, composure cracking, asking him to intervene, to slow you down, to fix you before you turned into something inconvenient, something powerful, something beyond them. They pleaded with him like he was their last hope, like he was the one person who could reach you, influence you, soften you back into something harmless and predictable. But what shook them the most wasn't what he did. It was what he didn't. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. He didn't flinch. He just smiled. Not the kind of smile that offers comfort or reassurance, not a gentle expression meant to soothe frightened people, but a slow, knowing smile, the kind worn by someone who has already seen the end of the movie and knows exactly how everything plays out. Someone who understands that the train isn't approaching the station. It left long ago and is already miles down the track. When they begged, "Can't you talk to them? Can't you make them understand? Can't you stop what's coming?" He didn't try to give them hope, didn't try to craft some heroic lie about how everything could still be fixed. He just looked at them with those calm, unshaken, painfully honest eyes and said the two words that hollowed them out from the inside. Too late. Not as a warning, not as pity, not as fear, just as fact. Too late. Like a verdict, like a final chapter already printed in ink that won't wash away, like a clock that struck midnight while they were still pretending it was early evening. Because here's what they still can't accept, what their pride refuses to let them admit. This isn't a situation to resolve. This isn't a detour you can be guided off. This isn't a journey they get to interrupt. You already crossed the line they hoped you'd never reach. Already stepped into a version of yourself that doesn't ask for permission, doesn't wait for approval, doesn't shrink just because other people are uncomfortable with the size of your presence. You already became the thing they feared and underestimated at the same time, the paradox they couldn't categorize, the force they cannot redirect. The moment they decided you needed to be warned was the exact moment they exposed their fear. Warnings are sent to control, not to care. Think about it. When someone is in danger, people act fast. They move. They intervene. But when someone becomes dangerous to the systems that once contained them, when someone grows into something too unpredictable, too awakened, too independent, that's when meetings are called. That's when alliances form. That's when they send diplomats instead of defenders, hoping conversation can soften what strength has already hardened. And he smiled because he knows something they still can't swallow. He knows what's been rising quietly inside you, the strength forged in silence while they mistook your stillness for surrender. The fire built slowly while they thought you were cooling down. They assumed they were watching your downfall. They didn't realize they were witnessing your evolution. They thought your pain was breaking you, when all it was doing was sharpening you. They thought your silence meant defeat, when really it was strategy. They thought your absence meant retreat, when it was really preparation. They believed they still had time to step in, to contain you, to reverse what had already begun. But the truth hit them too late. Your transformation didn't wait for their comfort. Now they stand there with that dawning terror in their eyes, understanding in painful clarity that there is no speech they can give, no apology they can craft, no negotiation they can offer that will undo what has already solidified inside you. The version of you they should have respected has already arrived. The power they should have never provoked is already awake. The control they swore they'd always have over this situation evaporated the moment they realized they needed to warn you. Now it's them who are too late, them who are behind, them who are powerless spectators in a story they thought they were directing. And you? You are already beyond their reach, beyond their understanding, beyond the smallness of the limits they tried to wrap around your life. You are not something they can stop. You are something they now have to live with. Let me take you deeper into that room, into that exact moment where concern pretended to be compassion, but was really fear trying its best to wear a friendly face. Because if you really slow it down, if you watch it frame by frame, it becomes almost cinematic in its quiet desperation. Picture them sitting in that little circle, shoulders stiff, breaths shallow, voices dancing between urgency and false calm as they tried to rationalize what they were feeling. They weren't grieving. They weren't worried. They were panicking in a way they didn't dare admit, because to say out loud that you scare them would mean acknowledging that their power over you has evaporated. So instead, they dressed their terror in empathy, wrapped it in sentimental language, and convinced themselves that this meeting was an act of care. We're worried. We just want what's best. We can't let them go down this path. They rehearsed those lines like actors playing noble characters, never once questioning why their concern always seems to activate when someone stops needing their approval. And there he was, witnessing the entire performance, watching them speak in circles, spinning illusions of responsibility and guardianship, while completely missing the simple truth that none of this was about protecting you. This was about preserving their relevance. He sat in silence, not because he didn't care, but because he understood something they hadn't even allowed themselves to imagine. They were already too late. He let them cling to the fantasy of control a little longer, let them strategize, negotiate, plan like generals preparing for a war that had already ended. Only when they finally turned to him, eyes full of desperate hope, did he break the illusion with those two calm, devastating words that shattered the room's false confidence. Too late. And the air shifted instantly. Their warmth drained. Their smiles faltered. The illusion cracked like glass under pressure, because suddenly they weren't discussing a problem to fix. They were facing a reality they couldn't undo. They scrambled after that, grasping at arguments, clinging to cliches about redemption and second chances, insisting that if they just reached out, if they just explained things properly, if they just guided you back, everything would fall back under their comfortable control. But his laughter stopped them. Not cruel, not superior, just deeply amused by how stubbornly they refused to accept reality. He told them the truth with a softness that somehow cut deeper than shouting ever could. They weren't early planners. They were late mourners. What they thought they were preventing had already happened. What they thought they were saving never needed saving. You weren't spiraling toward destruction. You had already completed an evolution so thorough, so internal, so irreversible, that they didn't even recognize you had crossed the finish line. They clung to the fantasy that you were still malleable, still in danger, still salvageable according to their standards. But those standards stopped applying to you the moment you stopped living inside the limitations they built for you. You weren't on the verge of becoming something. You had already arrived. You weren't slipping away. You had stepped beyond. And that realization didn't just frighten them. It humbled them in a way they didn't know how to process. Then came the rationalizing, the denial, the frantic scramble, where their egos tried desperately to rebuild control in their minds. They argued about possibilities, insisted on last chances, and desperately tried to rewrite the narrative, as if rewriting the story in conversation could somehow rewrite reality itself. But he didn't argue with them. He didn't need to. He just watched with that calm, knowing expression, because he could see what they couldn't. The truth beneath all their noise. The fear wasn't that you might break. The fear was that you might no longer need them. The fear wasn't that you were heading toward ruin. The fear was that you were heading toward power, real, self-generated, untouchable power. They didn't gather because you were unstable. They gathered because stability in you terrifies them more than chaos ever could. A quiet you is frightening. A focused you is dangerous. A peaceful you is unstoppable. They're not scared of your downfall. They're terrified of your ascension, because your success means their relevance dissolves. Your evolution means their authority collapses. Your independence means their illusion of control finally gets exposed for what it always was. Borrowed, fragile, temporary. And let's talk about their biggest mistake. The illusion that they were watching you closely, that they were aware of you, monitoring you, studying your behavior like analysts with front-row seats to your inner world. They thought they understood you because they saw patterns, reactions, habits. But the truth is, they were staring at the surface, while the real transformation was happening somewhere they cannot measure, cannot map, cannot infiltrate. They were waiting for dramatic signals, breakdowns, explosions, public declarations of change, something loud enough to confirm their theories. Instead, your transformation unfolded in silence. It didn't come with fireworks. It came with clarity. It didn't come with chaos. It came with control. It didn't look like rebellion. It looked like detachment. While they sat there confident in their observations, you slipped beyond their systems entirely. You stopped reacting the way they expected. You stopped playing roles they were familiar with. You didn't break. You transcended. You didn't collapse. You reorganized. And it didn't happen in a grand moment of cinematic revelation. It happened on a quiet day, in a quiet space, in a quiet realization that fundamentally rewired who you were and what you would ever allow again. And because it wasn't dramatic, they missed it. Because it wasn't loud, they dismissed it. Because you didn't perform your transformation for them, they assumed nothing changed. Now the world moves differently around you, and they feel it before they understand it. Doors they thought were locked open for you without knocking. Paths they swore were blocked unfold at your feet. Outcomes twist in your favor not by accident, but because you now operate outside the limitations they still believe are universal. And that terrifies them more than anything. Reality seems to bend toward you because you finally stopped bending yourself for reality. You are no longer manageable, no longer predictable, no longer contained within their fragile frameworks. And now they're left grappling with something their systems can't calculate. You are not malfunctioning. You are not lost. You are not collapsing. You are advancing. You are the variable their equations can't solve, the anomaly their logic can't account for, the proof that everything they believed about power, control, and limitation was never absolute. You are not the crisis. They are. You are not the threat to stability. They are the ones destabilized by the realization that they never owned the narrative the way they believed they did. And so they meet, they whisper, they plan, they panic, because deep down they know the truth they don't want to speak out loud. You are already beyond them, and nothing they do will ever bring you back to the version of yourself that fit inside their comfort. And here's another truth he carries that leaves them trembling. They think you're acting from anger, operating from bitterness, driven by some burning vendetta. And in the beginning, maybe that wasn't entirely wrong. Maybe there were nights when rage was the only heat still burning inside of you, when vengeance was the only fantasy that felt like oxygen, when imagining justice was the only way to stay alive. But that stage ended. You outgrew it. You burned through it like rocket fuel and left it far behind. Anger got you moving, but it was never meant to be your destination, because revenge still revolves around them. Vengeance still worships their relevance. Hatred is still a form of attachment, and you've reached a state far more terrifying than anger could ever be. Indifference. This is why he said too late to warn you, too late to pull you back, too late to convince you that you're going too far. You are not on a dangerous road. You finally left the dangerous one. You are not deviating from your path. You finally stepped onto it. You're not lost. You're finally home inside yourself. Everything they call dangerous about you is simply freedom they don't benefit from. Everything they think is a crisis is really your clarity. Everything they label as rebellion is actually alignment. They want you warned because they are afraid, not for you, but of what you represent. They want someone to deliver a dramatic intervention because they're still waiting for the moment where you return to being manageable, reasonable, predictable, controllable. That moment is never coming. The warning they want delivered to you is actually a warning they need for themselves, about the collapse of a system that cannot sustain itself when people stop needing it. But the people capable of explaining it already left the room long ago. Those who understand aren't interested in saving the old structure. They're busy building the next one. So who is going to stop you? Who is going to sit you down and beg you to shrink? Who is going to convince you to apologize for becoming sovereign? No one. Because the people who can truly see who you are becoming aren't frightened by it. They're inspired. They're watching like witnesses to a rare celestial event, learning, absorbing, respecting, recognizing. You are not a cautionary tale in their eyes. You are a reference point. You are evidence of what's possible when a human stops asking for permission to exist. And the ones who begged for you to be warned are simply going to have to live with the truth. No rescue mission is coming. No intervention is arriving. There is nothing to fix. You do not need saving. You need space. And now you finally have it. And so, after all the revelation, after all the becoming, after all the irrevocable transformation, let this moment be sealed not with fear, not with ego, but with sacred grounding. Divine Source, eternal architect, the one who witnesses every unseen evolution, we stand in acknowledgement of what has unfolded. Bless the one who crossed the threshold with no applause, who endured the fire without explanation, who rose not from spite but from truth. Strengthen them when destiny feels heavy. Guard their heart from bitterness as power awakens. Let clarity remain sharp. Let discernment remain pure. Let silence remain safe. Release every tether to validation, permission, and approval. Make their presence sovereign, their energy untouchable, their path undeniable. What you have set in motion cannot be interrupted. What you have ignited cannot be dimmed. What you have crowned cannot be dethroned. Let peace settle. Let confidence anchor. Let purpose speak louder than doubt. And as they step forward, not becoming, but being, may they remember nothing was wasted, nothing was late, nothing was accidental. Amen. And if this found you, it wasn't random. If it stirred something ancient within you, that isn't imagination. That's recognition. Stay where this resonance lives. Stay aligned with what you are stepping into. If you felt seen, affirmed, strengthened, then engage, respond, share the signal.